Hello again and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm a licensed realtor with Keller Williams Southern Arizona. And in today's video, we'll be discussing real estate. So, you want to buy a fourplex, do you? Well, if you do, then you're my kind of people. Helping newer investor clients begin to build wealth by buying dirt in Southern Arizona is one of my very favorite topics. As a full-time real estate agent since 2019, I make a living primarily by helping newer investors get into their first or next investment property in the greater Tucson metro area. And so you can imagine how pleased I was to hear that we recently crossed something of a personal milestone. With the help of my colleagues here at Team Integrity Tucson, I have logged 25 buyer-side transactions on a 2 to 4 unit multifamily property here locally since starting my career. And those are only the successful ones. It won't surprise you to know that there were another 25, if not 50, multifamily deals looked into that ultimately did not pan out for my clients at the time. Now, those successes and those failures taught me a lot, and I'm fortunate to be able to share that wisdom with dozens of newer investors, all making steps towards their own financial independence. And so if you've ever considered buying or house hacking your very first small multifamily property, but aren't exactly sure how much more work they are compared with a single family home, today's video is going to be information that you're going to want to know. We're breaking down all of the major relevant differences between multi and single family investment deals, all to help you sort out for yourself which type of deal is likely to make the most sense for your situation. Sound good? Let's get into it. So now, before we can start to unpack all of that, there are a couple of housekeeping items that I want to point out regarding the way I'm going to approach this video. For starters, at times I will be referencing the official contract terms or discussing the ways that we generally do business. And of course, in those contexts, I'm speaking specifically about my home market of Tucson, Arizona. Now, you'll still gain value from this video even if you are looking outside the state of Arizona. But of course, the precise contract language and landlord-tenant laws in play in your market might be different than precisely what I'm going to be discussing here. And the other item is that I will be focusing exclusively on the small multifamily space. Those 2 to 4 unit deals which can be purchased with conventional financing or house hacked via an owner-occupant home. The larger multifamily asset class of 5 to 10 units or more has a meaningfully different risk profile than a 2 to 4 unit deal. It utilizes a different purchase contract, requires the use of commercial or business debt lines with higher interest rates, and it introduces certain economies of scale for operating expenses that simply do not exist for the smaller deals. Now, believe it or not, buying a duplex or even a fourplex is more similar to the process of buying a vacant single-family home than it is to buying a large apartment deal. And so it does make sense to compare small multifamily deals to equivalent single-family rental options when starting to do research in a market, what I would call baselining a new market. So the way that I see it, there are 3 key differences between buying a small multifamily property instead of a single family one. Tenant occupancy becomes more common, the associated costs to conduct due diligence are often higher, and there are additional financial documents to research as part of the due diligence period. Let's tackle each of those one at a time. Really, the most fundamental difference between buying a personal home for your own enjoyment and a calculated investment purchase aimed to jumpstart a wealth-building timeline is often as simple as the difference between buying an occupied property and a vacant one. Now, while it is generally uncommon to have to work around a tenant's schedule when analyzing single-family deals, I would say that once you enter the realm of multifamily, it is the case the overwhelming majority of the time that you will have to interact with one or multiple inherited tenants as you conduct your due diligence, which is to say your physical and financial inspection of the property before deciding whether to move forward with the purchase. This is a reality and introduces an additional layer of complexity to your ability to inspect the property, as we are now involving the legal rights of the tenants under the Arizona Landlord-Tenant Act. And as I like to explain it to my clients, vacant and owner-occupied homes are easier to see in person in part because the owners are incentivized to make every accommodation to you while you are under contract, as they will be the ones being compensated on the sale when you do buy. However, a tenant is in no way incentivized to make conducting inspections easy on you. A lot of the time, one or several tenants had to reschedule off of work to be home to corral their pets in the time window when you plan to be there. And in some cases, the owner is less than transparent with the tenants as to why inspections are taking place, or even if the fact that their home is for sale at all. My point in all of this is to not underestimate the importance of pre-planning and communication when it comes to doing inspections. Upon opening escrow, your real estate agent needs to make sure they know who is coordinating with the tenants to deliver notice of the day of inspections, and whether any representative like the seller's agent or property manager will attend the inspections to allow access to the occupied units. Sometimes the property manager will meet you there and stay the entire time. Other times they'll just leave it up to the tenants to let you into the units on the day of. Either way, there is a specific procedure that the sellers have to notify the tenants in writing at least 48 hours prior to inspection day. So make sure you have at least a week of time for due diligence to allow for this sort of timeline. Best practice for ordering inspections on occupied multifamily property is always to shoot to get everything done in a single day. We already know that the tenants are not incentivized to work with us and make it easy to get in and out of their units, and a lot of the time the tenants will have to arrive late or leave early, forcing your inspectors to work through the units in a specific order as they go through and build their reports. With multiple inspectors, multiple tenants, and so many moving pieces at once, the one situation you want to avoid is having to go through all of that a second time due to a single item that was forgotten. I generally always recommend that my clients perform a general inspection, a termite and pest inspection, and a couple of roof bids in all circumstances, as well as common add-ons for the sewer lines or HVAC system inspections. Now, some of the time when you're working on a single family deal that is vacant, there's enough time to realize on the day of your other inspections that the air conditioner is not working effectively. And based on that information, it now makes sense to spend an extra $100 or so to get a full report on the age and functionality of the system. However, with a fully occupied 2 to 4 unit property and multiple schedules in the mix, you very much should aim to do all of your inspections on the same day. And in the rare instance where that cannot be done and a follow-up inspection needs to be scheduled, most of the time the inspection timeline will then need to be extended, which the seller has to agree to in writing. And speaking of all those moving pieces, it's important to draw attention to the additional costs of buying a fourplex versus a single family home. When we look at it on a cost per rentable unit, a multifamily property might be far more affordable on paper, but it really shouldn't surprise anyone to know that many of the cost points along the path that we call due diligence will become more expensive when we're looking into acquiring a property with multiple living units. On the financing side, there is a difference in the down payment of conventional loan products for multifamily deals. You house hackers moving into one unit of a 2 to 4 unit property can expect to put a 5% down payment on it, even if you qualify for the 3% down payment conventional loan option that first-time home buyers can use on a single family deal. And for investors buying for cash flow and not moving into it, the down payment is 25% rather than 20% for single family. So not only are our favorite multifamily deals often more expensive than single family options of similar size, but it requires a bit more skin in the game to buy in initially. You should also expect the day of inspections to be a more expensive affair. 4 units on the tax parcel generally means 4 sets of kitchens, 4 sets of bathrooms, 4 HVAC systems, and sometimes even 4 independent roofing structures. Thankfully, it's not exactly 4 times the amount of work or 4 times the price to inspect that quadplex, but another reasonable expectation that you should have going into this is that not only is the inspection going to take much longer because there are more things to inspect, but that the cost for that extra work will also proportionally increase. And then it's 2 to 4 times the amount of information referenced on the inspection report, which often means twice as many repairs as you end up asking for during post-inspection negotiations via the Benzer process. It feels like more work because it is more work. And for both of my go-to home inspectors who cover my multifamily deals here in Tucson, multiplex inspections are generally 2 to 2.5 times the price of a single family general inspection report. But of course, there are many other confounding factors to that analysis. It costs more to inspect a pool if there is one, and if you do decide to call in that specialty HVAC technician, the cost to have 4 separate units inspected further scales the all-in price. Okay, with most of the unfun stuff out of the way, let's now spend some time getting to know an important document that covers basically everything extra involved when selling investment properties. The residential income property addendum to the residential resale purchase contract. Now, interestingly, most of the boilerplate in this attachment is standard language in the commercial purchase contract, which is to say that effectively all commercial deals involve extra documents and disclosures above and beyond what we generally see in residential transactions. Copies of the leases for each of the tenants in place, a one-page overview of all lease terms called a rent roll, as well as any existing agreements with vendors for ongoing services like security, pest control, or general landscape. This category of information doesn't commonly come up with doing residential deals. However, we can simply add this two-page addendum to the standard purchase contract and know that we are covering all of our bases regarding the financial analysis of the property. This document also allows the seller to identify the property manager, either stipulating that the owner manages the rental him or herself, or by naming and providing contact information for a third-party property management company most likely to have access to this information. In both cases, there's a 5-day deadline for this documentation to get sent over to the buyers for review. And so most of the time you will have the leases in hand by the day of your physical inspections, or perhaps within a couple days of that, all in time to make your final decision after the inspection or due diligence period is over. So aside from the additional complications that tenants can bring, the additional documentation to review, and the general sentiment that this whole process will be more expensive than it would have been if you were buying a standard single-family deal, the only other meaningful downside when searching for a multifamily deal again relates back to those pesky tenants. We've already covered the way that they can make inspection day more difficult on you, but something that I see in most cases that it is impossible to be able to show an occupied unit before submitting our offer. Now, for some buyers, this can feel like one step too far. How is there any way to know what condition the property is in, or whether you would actually want to buy it and live in it without being able to see it first? Well, rather than answering that objection directly, I usually flip the situation and have my clients look at it from the seller's perspective. Now, the seller's agent probably told them that they are more likely to sell it quickly, and maybe even for a bit more money, if they do have at least one unit that remains vacant, so that potential buyers can do exactly that, schedule to view the interior and determine if they want to move forward or not. This happens a lot of the time, but if a property is already fully occupied by tenants, most sellers aren't willing to kick out a good tenant that pays rent on time simply to make one unit vacant and showable. Now, it may take longer to sell a fully occupied investment property, but it's also easier for the landlord to cash flow and hold on to the deal until the right buyer comes along. We are therefore left in a majority of cases that we cannot see one or all of the units until we've negotiated initial contract terms. Now, with that understanding, if anything, it makes taking the next steps even more straightforward. It's always worthwhile to do a couple of drive-bys of the property to get a feel for the exterior condition and general neighborhood, and then you run your cash flow analysis, either using the current rental information that was provided to you, or you can substitute fair market rents once you've actually done some updating and got the property reestablished in the market. After that, if everything looks good, you basically just assume the properties are in good condition and make your offer based on the information that you were actually able to collect. And conversely, after having the opportunity to see the occupied units while collecting your inspection reports, it is very reasonable and customary for a buyer to want to renegotiate for repairs to be done, or even to back out of the contract entirely due to information that was not knowable when writing the initial offer. This odd little quirk can and frequently does mean a higher fallout rate for 2 to 4 unit properties. Not necessarily a bad thing that good-looking deal went under contract once or even twice and then fell out. Sometimes it just means those two buyers were not as well informed about this process as you are. Now, at the risk of stating the obvious, none of these issues should be a deal breaker for you. Buying multifamily is marginally more complicated, but the upsides are absolutely worth your time. When buying a new multifamily deal, you almost always get immediate rental income for those first few months where you were just beginning to get your feet wet as a landlord and property owner. Your first and only duty as a new landlord is to inform your tenants where, when, and how to deposit their rent checks moving forward. And whether you're moving into one of these units to get low down payment financing, or you're putting down the standard 25% on an investment loan, being able to purchase multiple income streams with the same loan and down payment can be a very attractive feature. And so if you've ever asked yourself the question, should I invest in a short-term rental, medium-term rental, or long-term rental on my next deal? Buy a multifamily deal and you can try a little bit of everything. Let the market tell you what ends up being the most profitable use of that asset type. And so that's it. As you can see, buying a small multifamily deal is really just a subset of any standard residential purchase. It uses the same purchase contract with all of the same clauses and deadlines. We just add a single relevant addendum to include all of the other real estate investment related processes. It involves a few more moving pieces when you have to deal with tenant schedules, and you'll be well served to know that the transactional costs might be 50 to 100% more expensive than buying a luxury single family home. But just as is with life, so too it is with your investing approach. Fortune favors the bold, and you can take huge steps towards building long-term wealth, as well as just securing cheaper or potentially even free housing accommodations year after year in the meantime. And if you do happen to be curious about buying your own deal out here in the Tucson market and are in need of a real estate agent out here with relevant experience, then by all means feel free to reach out to me directly and we can schedule a phone call. 25 successful closings is something that I'm glad to take a moment to celebrate. And now, of course, it's time to start working our way towards that 50 closed house hack transaction count. I hope you found today's content valuable or at least practical. And speaking of those fundamental landlord decisions, if you seriously have asked yourself the question as to whether it makes sense to do short-term rentals, medium-term rentals, or long-term rentals to help you achieve financial independence, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, as I plan to cover that very topic in a video coming soon. We'll see you then.